I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. I'm continuing my wonderfully fun conversation with Ed Larson, who knows much more about Antarctica than I do, so it's always a pleasure to be a student professor with someone who's done all this reading. An Empire of Ice is his book, Scott Shackleton and the Heroic Age of Antarctic Science. Now we go back to the Northwest Passage. You will recall that in the early days, the dreams of London was to find a way through what we now know to be almost impassable, except for global climate disruption, which is to go from the North Atlantic to the North Pacific. There was an expedition, and it was launched by a man in his seniority who had already been a governor. His name was John Franklin. He attempted to get through the Northwest Passage in the 19th century. He failed. He died. His wife then launched a series of rescue operations to find him, thinking he was stuck out there somewhere, and she had to bring him back. And on one of those expeditions was a young midshipman. His name was Markham. He became Sir Clements Robert Markham. Ed, why is Markham so critical to the story of Antarctica? How does he contribute to this drama?
Well, Markham is a true Victorian character, larger-than-life Victorian character who becomes, has ample wealth to indulge his interests, and he is a geographer extraordinaire. And he had, as a young man, as was very common with the upper crust in England, he joined the Navy for a while. And on that, while in the Navy, he found basically meaning for his life in exploration. And he had participated in the search for Sir John Franklin, the Franklin search. The search went on for 20 years, and in the process, the British Royal Navy and private expeditions literally mapped that archipelago of islands above Canada, which is where Franklin was lost. And he comes back. He doesn't really like being in the Navy. He doesn't like Navy discipline. He's a very independent-minded man, and he musters out of the Navy. And he enters a life of a mixture of exploration and geography and science, sort of a gentleman. He takes expeditions. He's the one who gets the quinine out of Peru and takes it to India and other places where it can be grown. He travels in India. He travels different in Ethiopia, Abyssinia, and he eventually. And he'll come back to England. He eventually works his way up. He becomes involved in the Royal Geographic Society, serving for 2 decades as its secretary, and then as is president. And he has a strong attachment to the British Navy. In fact, his cousin is a leading captain in the Navy, very prominent. He has a strong attachment to empire. He's been very involved in Africa and building empire in South America and in India. He has a very strong ego, and he's a very driven character, well-connected, and he thinks it all fits together with him of going back to either succeed in getting through the Northwest Passage or, even better, get to the North Pole. I know we're a long way from the South Pole, about as far as we can get. But he fixes on this, and he pushes to have the Navy, the British Navy, the Royal Navy, engage in explorations to reach the North Pole. And he pushes the government, and he's in the Colonial Office, and he pushes the Royal Society to back this. And so the British re-engage. They had, after the failure of Franklin and the Franklin search, they pull out of the North of this sort of exploring. But he thinks it's the best possible training during peacetime for the Navy. It builds camaraderie among the men. It toughens the officers. It toughens the men. He has his romantic notions, almost like Arthur trying to find the Holy Grail, because he thinks it's great for the men, great for morale in peacetime. It gives the Navy something to do, and also it extends the British domain. Remember, Northern Canada was still British back then. It was under the Hudson's Bay Company, and so he he gets some expeditions to go north, and they are utter failures.
Right.
Utter failures. And when those fail and people die on them, his cousin is on it and leads a disastrous march to the North Pole that's an utter failure. Markham then recalibrates that, and because he knows the North Pole is out of the question, and it's just water up there. And he tries for 30 years to get the British involved with going to the South Pole, because there's land, there's potential new territory, there might be minerals or something. But most of all, this is a chance during peacetime to build the Navy and to build British prestige. And when he becomes president of the Royal Society in the 1890s, he is absolutely fixed on that goal of getting an expedition to the South. He's already met Robert Falcon Scott, who is he's a cadet in the Navy, and he chooses it in his own mind that would be the perfect leader of the expedition now that he's too old to do it. And in that sense, he is central to getting the British engaged. He's a natural writer. He writes articles for all the popular journals, all the journals for the upper crust, to try to excite them to make, when you really think about it, getting to the South Pole, you have to choose. It's an arbitrary goal. It's like getting to the head of the Nile, which, of course, Speakes and Livingston and Burton were all focused on. You have to, or getting to the Himalayas, or later for us, getting to the moon. You have to. He had to romanticize this objective and make the British people pick getting to the South Pole as an objective worthy of what Britain should be all about.
In other words, he needed to make it a dream. And there's a sidebar here before we plunge into the race to the South Pole, which is Fridtjof Nansen, an explorer, Norwegian explorer, who became the not mentor but inspiration for Roald Amundsen. Nansen was successful in reaching through the Arctic ice, this is in the north, and was successful in the Northwest Passage. And so this sidebar that Markham had to watch the Norwegians leap ahead of British explorers while he was frustrated with the reluctance of the Victorians to get back to exploring.
Nansen was an extraordinary character. He, out of the blue, he skied across Greenland. That's how he got his name. He skied with a party of 4 others across Greenland, and this is when Norwegian nationalism was just starting, and they wanted to claim their independence. They were part of Sweden. And he came back, this resounding national hero, and it really was not that he skied across Greenland, which no one else had done that before. That was certainly amazing. But he becomes he becomes the focal point of Norwegian pride, much like George Washington would be for America, and the focal point of independence. And then he becomes a scientist in his own right. He's appointed ambassador to England. He eventually wins the Nobel Peace Prize for his work later in life.
In the 1930s, yes, a spectacular life.
Spectacular life. Now, Amundsen was never at that level, but Amundsen idealized him as a boy. It was when he was a boy that Nansen skied across Greenland. Later on, he would take the Arctic Drift expedition up toward the North Pole, and his boat, the Fram. And Amundsen wanted the fame and the glory that Nansen got. He became hooked on this celebrity because Nansen was literally a larger-than-life celebrity.
This is very much like a romantic drama, and the professor mentions Arthur and the Round Table. In the minds of these men, it was played out in the newspapers. You can read it there. It's played out in the best books and the best clubs. They talk about it all the time. It becomes a fascination to them. It becomes gripping for whole generations of school children who read about this. In fact, at some point, Amundsen's heroism is part of enduring extreme pain and extreme conditions, and that's preached to the young men on the battlefield in the First War. This search for Antarctica penetrates everyone's imagination in the beginning of the 20th century. We're going to next turn to Scott versus Amundsen and the race to the poles. It requires some preliminary, but we'll get there. The book is An Empire of Ice. Edward J. Larson is the author.